ghost hunter spotted me, pointed and smiled. "Yes, you, in the white shirt." "Yeah, hi," I said, and I know I sounded nervous, because I felt so dumb for sounding so nervous. "I was just wondering, what's the scariest thing you can remember from your career as a ghost hunter?" I was halfway back in the auditorium, quite a distance from the stage, but I saw his face fall. I know I did. "Well," he said, forcing a tight little laugh, "there are so many scary moments to recall. They tend to pop up quite often when you're in my line of work." This statement got a little chuckle from the audience. I felt pretty stupid for asking the question at all. He proceeded to tell some story about tracking a poltergeist in an abandoned elementary school, and his flashlight failing. I remember because it wasn't particularly scary. At least, it didn't seem that way for someone who hunts ghosts for a living. He moved on from the story and answered a few more questions. He didn't look my way again. When it was over and everyone started to leave, I decided not to get stuck in the crush of students leaving through the front door. Feeling somewhat dejected, like I had done something wrong, I slipped quietly out of the theater exit and headed for my dorm. The ghost hunter was sitting outside on a bench near the bike racks, smoking a cigarette. I ducked my head and tried to get by without him noticing. "Hey kid." He took another drag and then crushed the cigarette out on the cement bench beside him. "Listen, I'm sorry," I remember blurting, feeling like such a stupid kid. "I know my question was dumb. I wasn't trying to make fun of you or anything." He shook his head. He brushed the ashes off the bench. He patted the space beside him, inviting me to sit down. I hesitated for a moment. Then I sat next to him, keeping a healthy distance between us. "I didn't tell the truth," the ghost hunter said. His face looked much older up close, the wrinkles deeper. The confident salesman aura had faded from him, leaving behind a man in his 60s who had clearly seen a lot of things. The story I told, it wasn't the scariest moment of my career. "I figured that," I remember saying. He nodded as though he had known I knew. "This is the scariest moment of my career," he said. And this is what he told me. It was the 1970s. I was a much younger man back then. I hadn't reached success in the paranormal industry quite yet, and was left to pick up the scraps that the pros didn't want. Usually they were schizophrenics whose broken minds tricked them into believing that there were phantoms after them, or children playing pranks on gullible and concerned members of the neighborhood. If anything, it was a simple cleansing of the home with sage, and off I went. When I first got the call, I was ecstatic. What the client was describing appeared to be a full-blown demonic haunting, complete with physical manifestations, possession, and multiple witnesses. It was the break that I was searching for. It was the break that I desperately needed. The only detail that truly worried me was about their teenage son. The person they claimed to be suffering from possession had become violent with the members of his family. Up until recently, he had only acted out of character, moody. However, a week prior, he actually attacked one of his older female cousins. She was shaken, but mostly unharmed. The family sent her to live elsewhere until it could be all figured out. Therefore, when I headed out to their home, I made sure to arrive fully prepared. I brought holy water, crucifixes, sage, and, just for good measure, a small loaded handgun. I knew it wouldn't come to that, but something about the mother's frantic tone over the phone told me it was just a good idea. I wish I could say the visit itself was exciting. Unfortunately, from the moment I pulled into the driveway of the beautiful remodeled Victorian, all activity seemed to stop. That is, if it was ever there to begin with. I spent 2 weeks investigating that home. I used equipment considered very technologically advanced for the era. I studied energy waves. I interviewed the son whose family claimed to be possessed when in fact, he just seemed to be depressed. Perhaps psychologically disturbed. I recommended the family a therapist, a renowned child psychologist who is famous for his work with violent young men. On my last day in the house, they took him to the city for treatment. His parents returned shortly before midnight, retiring wearily to their bedroom, leaving me alone in the kitchen to go over my findings. There was nothing to be said, and I knew it. Everything they had described could be written off to the hysterics of a family who couldn't admit their son was in desperate need of medical attention. Everything, that is, except for the drains in the floor. Upon touring the home, I was impressed with how up-to-date it had been brought. It was clearly from the 1900s, and kept in immaculate condition. The woodwork and character of the house was carefully preserved, as it was given necessary updates, like modern plumbing and electricity. The basement was the only area that seemed stuck in time. The walls were a clammy stone that was prone to gathering moisture, leaving it unfit to store anything vulnerable to spiders or mold. The family had left it empty for this reason, and while it certainly felt very spooky to spend any amount of time in the windowless room with the single hanging light and its vast cement floors, I never recorded anything of note in this area. However, there was one thing I couldn't understand. Given the approximate time the house had been built, and its presence in a residential neighborhood, there was simply no accounting for the 4 large slotted drains set in the cold concrete floor. As I sat alone in the kitchen, poring over my meager findings, trying to find meaning in all these words, I heard something. It was only a faint sound at first, and so I ignored it. But then it came again, louder this time. There was a steep spiral staircase that led up to the second floor, winding up from the corner of the small kitchen, and it was where the noise seemed to be emanating from. Assuming it was simply one of the homeowners, restless after dropping their son off in an institution, I glanced up. It was coming down the stairs. I can't say walking because that wasn't the case. It was just... floating isn't even the right word. Just moving. Moving down the stairs. Straight at me. It had no eyes. It had no face. And yet somehow I knew it was looking at me. Right at me. Into the very depths of my soul. Then it spoke. I'm not sure how it spoke. I don't think I actually heard anything. So perhaps it used some sort of telepathy. Either way, I can recall the words to this very day. I didn't think. I couldn't. I just ran. I upended my chair when I fled, scattering papers across the kitchen that claimed this house wasn't really haunted, that it was all hallucinations of a very sick boy. I left them there. Do you know how awful that is? I left those people in that house with that thing. I didn't stop driving for 30 miles, for God's sake. When I realized how far I had gone, I finally pulled over and called the family from a payphone. They were the furthest thing from my mind when I saw it. All I could do was respond to the deep animal instinct to escape, to run out of that supposedly safe house with my tail between my legs. They moved, I think. I was unable to continue my investigation. In writing, I cited insufficient evidence, but I knew it was cowardice. I believe the house was leveled a few years later. I ended up doing my own research. Curiosity ate away at me with vicious little rat teeth as time went by. The accusation still ringing fresh in my ears. You know what he did to us. And eventually, yes, I did. Old newspaper clippings didn't tie the stories together. Not necessarily. But I was able to piece some of the meaning out of the yellowed excerpts. At some point around the turn of the century, the house had been residence to a well-respected mortician. Unable to find a building in town to suit his needs, he said, He built his own home/office space. It was a grand feat of architecture and a shining example of a true entrepreneur, a man pursuing the American dream of running his own business. Upstairs was the bedroom, mid-level the funeral home, in the basement, a mortuary. I then realized what the drains were for. Separately, decades later, another well-respected member of the local community was arrested under the suspicious cause. The newspaper didn't elaborate, probably due to the sensitive nature of the crimes, but his punishment was minor. After a brief stay in the local jail, the perpetrator stripped his home of all of its value and left town. I suppose I don't know for sure, but the words of that thing still echo through my head to this day. You know, desire to build a house that contained his business to suit his needs. The things that were done to those bodies in the basement were unspeakable. But yes, I know. I know what he did to them. And it's because of this, coming face to face with the true nature of a man in its darkest places, that the encounter with that faceless thing is the scariest moment of my career. Because now, I know. I still remember his expression, the way all the color dropped out of him as he went on, the white hair of his beard barely distinguishable from his pale skin, the slump of his shoulders, the way his voice was shaking. I apologized. He waved me off. Then he left. I felt terrible. I still feel terrible for making him relive that moment. But as I grew up, as campus activities were replaced with bills in my own career, the ghost hunter fell to the back of my mind little by little. Until last week, when I moved in with my fiancée. When I took the boxes into the basement despite her warnings of spiders and mold. Because there's a large, slotted drain in the center of the room. And I'm so worried, so scared about what I might know.
I was a good soldier. I had purpose, and I loved it. I rode shotgun in the lead Humvee, and I looked for bombs. Stop the chart. You don't see the bomb unless they want you to.
What you got?
I don't see nothing, man.
You don't see it. He feels it.
I was a good soldier. I had purpose, and I loved it.
You kicked some ass over there?
Yeah, man.
We wanted it to be perfect.
I'm home with my favorite girls. It's perfect, baby.
Am I getting late or what?
Oh, yeah, you're getting late.
Maybe I'm foolish.
How long you been up?
It's already 4 p.m. in Baghdad. Got one chocolate chip smiley face pancake for you.
She doesn't like chocolate.
Okay, I guess I missed that part.
I'm only human.
2 Army Commendation Medals,
Only human.
an Army Achievement Medal. Impressive.
You never told me you were a hero. Don't spare me the details. I can take anything but quiet.
Some people got the real problem.
You are my hammer out there. Don't let these young guys see you fold.
Some people think I can
I don't belong here. He did his job. Now do yours.
I'm only human after all. I'm only human.
You alright? No, I'm not alright.
Don't put the blame on me.
Can't name him after me.
Don't put the blame on me.
He's too perfect.
Is there a specific incident that troubles you?
'Cause I'm no prophet or Messiah. You should go looking somewhere higher.
know this don't look like much of a life, but every morning I get up, I'm grateful. I'm alive because of you.
I'm only human. I made mistakes. I'm only human. It's all it takes to put the blame on me.
Thank you for looking after my son.
I'm not a hero. We're brothers. We look after each other.
I'm only human. After all, don't put the blame on me.
When somebody goes hunting, they're normally right smack in the middle of a forest or the woods, completely devoid of other people. Seems like the perfect setting for a horror story, right? These 3 supposedly true stories will show you just what can go wrong while hunting. This first story was submitted to me in June by somebody named Robert Cherneman. His story takes place upstate New York, a place I'm familiar with. Here's his story. I've been a passionate hunter ever since my dad before me started taking me out on trips every Saturday, and I thought I would pass down the same tradition to my son. During the setting of this story, my son Peter was 10 years old. I figured that was a good age to introduce him to the world of hunting. I armed Peter and myself with Remington Model 798 sniper rifles. However, I carried it until I found the spot where I usually find
Did you hear
game.
that shit?
We could have used the deer hunting tower hidden deeper in the woods, but I figured that wouldn't be the best first-time experience. I handed him the gun when we were set up. I had already taught him the basics of firearms, so it wasn't like I was taking him out there with no experience. I chose to stay put the first time, as it would be easier for him, and I figured I would move up to the more advanced methods of hunting in the future sessions. There was a lot of waiting, more waiting than usual in this certain spot. I could see Peter was getting bored, constantly yawning and sighing, and that disappointed me. I didn't want him to think this sport was that boring, so I packed up our stuff and told him we're moving. He seemed to perk up a bit with excitement, and that made me happy. As soon as we began walking, I heard footsteps. I put my arm in front of Peter silently and motioned for him to raise his gun. He did with excitement, until I spotted someone's head peer out from around a tree in the distance. I pushed the gun down immediately, a bit disappointed, but also relieved that Peter didn't shoot. I gave him a quick little apologetic wave, and with that, he disappeared back behind the tree out of sight. Was he another hunter? I couldn't tell, but from what I saw of him, even in the distance, there was something off-putting about his face. I couldn't put my finger on what it was at that moment. Seeing somebody this deep into the woods was rare and also strange, and this guy didn't exactly look like a hunter. So, as a safety precaution, I suppose, I steered Peter in the other direction. Still no sign of any deer. Peter asked me about the man, like who I thought he was, for example, as expected, and I just told him I didn't know, and I didn't think we should get closer. I didn't want to lie to him. A few minutes later, Peter started complaining that he was hungry. I was getting pretty hungry myself, so we stopped and unpacked our snacks. I was extremely disappointed that nothing had happened by now. While eating my sandwich, I heard footsteps again in the distance. Peter did too, as he immediately picked up his rifle and pointed it in that direction. I felt my heart drop when I could see the same man from before peering out from another tree at us. I lowered Peter's gun again, and I noticed he seemed a bit uncomfortable now, as was I. I told him to wait there while I began to walk over to the man, trying to emotionally prepare myself to confront him. About halfway over, I stopped and thought to myself, what the hell am I doing? My son is right over there. I turned around and hurried back to Peter, telling him it's time to go. If you had your son in the middle of the woods and you thought you were being stalked, odds are you would just want to get out of there too. We were not running. We were merely walking back to the road. I was mentally waiting for a twig snap or a leaf crunch from behind us, and when it happened, I nudged Peter to go along ahead. I angrily turned around and stormed towards the man, who was once again peering from behind a tree. I'd say when I got within 30 feet from the tree, he moved back behind the tree out of sight. And then I heard a thud, as if something were just dropped onto the ground. I had my gun loaded in my hand as I cautiously walked up to the tree. I didn't even say a word. I don't know why. All I did was slowly creep up to the tree, and when I got there, I felt as if everything around me had completely collapsed, or rather ceased to exist, and all that I could focus on was the head laying face first on the ground in front of me. No body, just head. I didn't even look up or around the tree to see who had dropped it there. I just full on sprinted back to Peter and told him to run. We made it back home safely within 5 minutes, and I made 100% sure we weren't followed. However, I stayed up the whole night keeping watch for the sake of my family's safety. I found out the next day through my wife that there had been 2 disappearances of local hunters, and that's when I called the police and reported what I had experienced. I had to, of course, play it safe for a long time, at least a few months, before taking my son out again. What baffles me, though, is how this person managed to kill 2 hunters who obviously had to be armed with some kind of weapon. I have since resumed hunting with my son. The next story was submitted to me just a month ago by Nathan Zielinski, and it's more of a mix between a camping and a hunting story. Here it is. It was my first time hunting. I was 21, going with my friends Anthony, Christian, Tom, and his girlfriend Diana to some park in Colorado to go elk hunting. We brought 2 separate tents that were relatively large. I couldn't even tell you the name of the gun Anthony handed me. It was just a basic-looking hunting rifle. Honestly, I didn't know how I felt about the whole thing. Killing a living, breathing animal that has just as much of a will to live as me, merely for so-called fun, didn't seem cool to me. But it was like the 5th time Anthony offered, and I felt like I had to say yes. I decided I wouldn't shoot any animals about halfway through the car ride. Anthony pulled into a lot, we unpacked the car, and proceeded to hike about a mile into the woods before setting up camp. First thing after setting up camp, we all followed Anthony's lead as he proudly babbled on about hunting techniques. I wished I had someone to laugh about it with, but everyone else seemed serious about it as well. I tried busting Anthony's chops by asking him, wouldn't it be better to stop talking if you don't want to scare away any potential prey? He got pissed. I could tell he took this really seriously, and from there on, I shut up. And by there on, I mean however long things were going normal, and that wasn't long. During our hunt, we ran into a rather strange group of people. 3 rather large, dirty men with long, sticky hair. They looked like they belonged to some kind of inbreeding house deep in the woods. They looked at us and sort of nodded their heads as if to say hello as we passed by them, one by one. We were officially freaked out. It might sound like something that would be laughable, but under the circumstances, it was horrifying. We were deep in the woods, far from the lot, which was, for the record, completely empty. And it may sound exaggerated, but these 3 looked like creepy lowlives who could be dangerous. Thankfully, though, they didn't follow us, which allowed for us to peacefully go on with our hunt. Anthony ended up killing a deer. We didn't find any elks. We dragged the deer all the way back to our campsite, and that was actually our dinner for the night. Anthony and Tom went through a disgusting, bloody process of skinning, and I'm pretty sure gutting the deer, but I didn't watch for more than a few seconds. Anthony made us venison burgers. He came prepared with the buns and everything. While I didn't particularly agree with the sport, I was impressed with Anthony. We went to sleep first thing at dark with the fire still going outside, and I was having a really bad time trying to get comfortable in that sleeping bag. Anthony and Christian seemed to fall asleep quickly, while I, on the other hand, had to be rolling around for at least 2 hours. I've always had a hard time falling asleep in sleeping bags. I was actually about to get up and go outside to pee when I heard footsteps coming from outside the tent. I opened my mouth to call out Tom or Diana's name, but I realized, what if it wasn't them? I lay silently and listened. In an unexpected instant, the zipper to our tent got pulled down, and I threw my head down to the side and acted as if I were asleep. There was a short pause before the zipper got pulled back up. I waited until the pairs of footsteps moved away. They seemed to be moving to Tom and Diana's tent. Then I realized it must have been them, and they must have been checking if we were asleep so they could, mess around, I guess. So I decided to play a little joke on them. I gave it about 5 minutes before I unzipped the tent and began creeping over to their tent. Then I realized their zipper was still undone. That's strange, I thought to myself. I crept over expecting to scare the two lovebirds. But instead, when I got close enough, I saw two men inside of the tent doing something to Diana. At that moment, I screamed as loud as I could, mostly out of fear, but also to wake everyone up. Anthony and Christian stormed out from the tent with their rifles. When the two men fled from the tent, I realized something. They were the same two men we had seen earlier. Tom and Anthony fired rounds in their direction to scare them off. However, something even more horrifying happened after that. After they shot their rounds, we all looked around us, completely horrified, as men in almost all directions who were previously hiding in bushes and behind trees were taking off in different directions. We tried waking up Tom and Diana, but they seemed to have been injected with some kind of tranquilizers by the men. We had no choice but to wait until they woke up, which took about maybe half an hour. Running back to the car in that pitch-black forest was one of the most horrifying moments of my life. We don't know who all those people were. They could have been part of some secluded inbreeding house for all we knew, or even some kind of cannibalistic family. We have no idea what they were planning on doing with Tom and Diana, but we're just happy we all got out of there safely. This last story was written by Jared the Sprinter, and he shares his night hunting experience. I was doing some night hog hunting in the woods near my backyard. I was hiding in the tower I had built about a decade ago. In case anyone's wondering, I of course had a night vision scope attachment. I guess I'm what you would consider a hardcore hunter. I don't want to bore you with the unnecessary story prolonging details, so I'll make this short. And I want everyone to know that though I agree this story sounds far-fetched and crazy, it is nothing but the truth. And I, in a way, actually consider myself lucky that I'll always have such a horrifying story to share. So, while I was sitting in the tower waiting for movement, it finally came. I took aim and found the source. But it wasn't at all a hog, or any kind of animal I was expecting. It was a person, a man wearing all black. Black sweatpants, black shoes, and a black hoodie with the hood over his head. But that wasn't the freakiest part. He was dragging a sack behind him. My heart started racing. I was pretty sure I was witnessing this guy trying to bury a body. I continued to watch him, but then he slowed down, and I swear to God, it looked as if he turned his head up to me. I ducked down under the wooden walls of the tower, shaking in my boots. Yes, I had a gun, but just the idea of using it against a person is horrifying. I lay low, praying to God that he hadn't seen me. It wouldn't make sense if he could, though. It's practically pitch black out here, or at least that was my logic. Seconds felt like an eternity as I waited for the footsteps in the leaves to move elsewhere, but I didn't hear any footsteps. All I heard was the sound of a foot hitting one of the wooden planks on the ladder of the tower. I felt the entire tower vibrate and shake as there were two more steps moving up the ladder. At this point, I was asking myself deep down, am I going to be able to shoot someone? But for some reason, whoever was down there decided not to climb all the way up, as I heard them jump back down to the forest ground and began dragging the sack away. I think I stayed frozen like a statue for at least 10 minutes before even peeking over the ledge again. The coast seemed clear. I had to get home and warn the police immediately. I hopped over the ledge and descended down the ladder. I turned on my pocket flashlight, which in hindsight was a stupid move considering the situation, and ran back in the direction of my house. I was only able to run for about 10 seconds or so when I heard the rapid, manic footsteps crunching the leaves from behind me. I took a look over my shoulder, and there he was, inches away from my face. I spun around and shot him in the shoulder. He stopped and screamed in agony, and I took that moment to finish my dash to my house. Again, in hindsight, I should have held him hostage somehow, but that doesn't even matter now. I I called the police, who showed up within 15 minutes with a whole search squad, and I led them all into the woods to the exact location where I shot him. There was a faint yet noticeable blood trail spilled onto the leaves, which led past the body bag, which the cops seized, and eventually right to the maniac, who was hiding under a log next to a tree. He was arrested and tried for the murder of Jin Quen Sakanaki, a Japanese corner store owner. I don't know the full story behind it, but I do know I won't forget this one for the rest of my life, and I'll also be telling it for the rest of my life.
Easy does it.
I'm sorry.
Easy. Tick, tock, tick, tock. There's nobody there. There's nobody there. It's all in your head. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It's all in your head. You're safe. You're safe. You're safe. Finally, I slowly released the deep breath I was holding, and I opened my eyes. My room was cloaked in a warm curtain of black, only the faint glow of my lava lamp shining through and breaking its grasp around me. Sunlight was barely beginning to stream into the room from my window, and soon enough the rest of the darkness would die as well. I sat up in my bed, dark blue blankets sliding off from around me as I left their comforting embrace. I didn't want to get up yet, but at the same time I didn't want to stay in either. I didn't want to go back to sleep, and after that nightmare I couldn't even if I tried. I rubbed my clammy palms over my eyes, rubbing away the remaining hold sleep had over me. These dreams are getting worse, I thought to myself with a groan. I shifted over and pushed myself up, pausing for a moment before finally getting out of bed and clicking on that light above my head. The shadows hissed and slithered away. They skittered and crawled all across the room, their amorphous bodies slithering under every nook and cranny and their claws scraping the walls as they scrambled away into their dark sanctuaries. All was quiet. All was calm. I was safe. I breathed out a soft sigh of relief. I stretched my arms above my head as I scuffled across the room to the mirror propped against the back of my dresser. Neck-length charcoal hair, gray prematurely at the roots. Falling over the left side of my face messily from my hysterical wake-up. Lightly tanned skin and bright aqua eyes with prominently dark circles around underneath them. Marcus Tamford. Same guy I always was. And always will be. Every day I had to look. Every day I had to be sure. If I didn't, I was sure that one day I'd wake up and see a different pair of eyes staring back at me from this mirror. But for now, the paranoia fled as well, and I smiled ever so slightly. Though that feeling of ease never stayed in the mornings. The shadows were always restless, and I could see their eyes glaring at me from under my desk in the mirror.
Are you here?
Suddenly whipped around and scrambled back against the dresser with a loud clatter, but when I turned to face that phantom plaguing my vision, it was gone. Another day, another hallucination. I should have been used to it by now. I shouldn't still be scared, especially when this happens every single day. Ever since I was a little kid, I was plagued by these demented hallucinations. could see dark figures following me at night from the corner of my eyes. I'd feel the wash of hot, heavy breathing from hungry shadows looking over my shoulder. And at night, I'll hear the soft hisses and growls of the shadows as they squirmed against my bed, waiting to snatch me up in an instant. My brain's a nightmarish fog, and the border between fantasy and reality is impossible to see on the worst of days. I have to take medication to try and prevent them from overcoming my senses, and I can't even sleep anymore without a light on and some kind of white noise to fill in the painful silence of my room at night, but the pills only lasted so long. Once I hit puberty, their effects got weaker and weaker on my body. I was becoming immune to them, and that realization came with one even more horrifying. If I stop taking my pills now, the nightmares will only be even stronger than they were before. This was the thought that kept me awake at night. The thought that even with how bad they were now, that they could be twice as bad if I didn't fight back at all. I put my hand on my chest, feeling my heartbeat finally starting to calm back down. I breathed out a deep, tired sigh as I pushed myself away from the dresser. The quicker I got ready, the quicker I could take my meds and get rid of those visions for the day. I hastily flew on my usual garb, red t-shirt, my favorite black camouflage hoodie, a pair of long, dark red jeans, and a pair of bright red and white sneakers.
The truck?
So I had plenty of time before class, so now the most important task.
Hold on, I'll go downstairs right now, Michael.
I opened my door, turned my gaze down to the deep, disturbing dark hallway that my room was connected to. My blood ran cold. Just the sight of that vast emptiness of dark space before me. Kenophobia, the fear of voids or empty spaces. Oscillophobia, the fear of darkness. Two of the many great fears that consume my being every day of my life. I uneasily shifted my gaze up to the door across from my bedroom. The bathroom. Safety. Swallowing back the butterflies fluttering up from my stomach, I quickly darted across the hall over to the door opposite my room. My movements were sharp and frantic as I grasped the knob of the bathroom door. But the knob wouldn't turn. My breath caught in my throat and panic took over. The darkness was hungry. The shadows wanted blood. I could feel the wash of their serpentine breath ghost across my skin, and I could hear their claws scraping against the carpet as they clawed their way towards me, slower, closer, faster, ever faster, frenzied, hungry. Click. The door flew open. I went in. A strangled gasp escaped me, as from the corner of my eye I made out the blur of a mangled black mass of flesh barely skimmed past the back of my knees. A hungry, warped snarl escaped its lips as I slammed the door shut behind me. Lights on, door closed. It's gone. I'm safe.
More tracks.
I need my meds now. My body was still trembling from the narrow encounter, and my hands fumbled with the mirrored doors of the medicine cabinet. I reached inside, I grasped that bottle tightly in my shaky hands, twisting the cap off and letting it clatter down into the sink carelessly. I then quickly overturned the bottle to let that small pellet rain into my palm. It's fun when you try to run, Marcus. Hot breath ghost past my ear. I jumped and whirled around and immediately dropped the bottle in my panic, but the minute I looked, whatever monstrosity was there behind me was gone. Wait, my pills. As quick as I could, I returned to the overturned bottle, and as fast as I had tried to scramble at the pellets rolling down the drain, I wasn't fast enough. Down they went, every last one of them. Gone. What now? I didn't know what to do. I stood trembling and terrified as I stared at that hollow drain. It's exactly what I feared most. It's exactly what I tried to prevent every day and night, but now the day is here. They'll come back now, even stronger than ever. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. In that very moment, time had stopped altogether. I was frozen and nothing could thaw me from my place. I clenched my eyes shut tight. I couldn't let this happen. I had to force myself to swallow down the anxiety rising up in my gut before it sent me into hysteria. I slowly looked to the bathroom door beside me. Dare I open it? Couldn't I just stay in here until my mom goes to the doctor and gets me a refill? I contemplated this for a moment, combing my fingers uneasily through my long, graying hair, and finally, I firmly grasped the knob of the door and I twisted it. Light from the bathroom streamed out into the hallway. Nothing was there. I sighed. Heavier than ever, I assure relief. The sun was starting to really shine in and chase away the last of the shadows. A small smile cracked over my face as I clicked off the light to the bathroom and closed the door. Maybe I really was safe. Maybe my fear of it all was just in my head. And I can only hope at this point, I guess. The rest of the morning went smoothly, no issues or breaks in its usual flow at all. My mom woke up, drove me out to school, and it was back to business as usual. Wait.
What are you doing?
I sat in my third period class. My eyes focused on the clock ticking away on the wall. I barely got any sleep last night, thanks to my insomnia and those damn nightmares, and no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't focus on the class. This even was my favorite class of the day. I needed something to wake me up. I flicked up at my notes and started reading from the one bookmarked page in the spiral. List of common human phobias. Aclophobia, arachnophobia, autophobia, batophobia, vulgophobia, catoptrophobia, claustrophobia, cometrophobia, dementrophobia, dementophobia, dementophobia, the fear of insanity, the most deadly of them all. I yawned, waking up so early after hardly being able to sleep for a week.
You did
It's really
it.
starting to take its toll on me. My eyes could hardly stay open as I gazed over the paper mindlessly, going over every long, obnoxious word I had to memorize, all by heart.
Man, I'm about to fall.
For a brief moment, I felt my eyes close completely. Sweet siren of sleep, calling me into her tender embrace.
Where is
Tamper!
my
I jolted up in my seat at the call of my name and focused my eyes up to my teacher, Mr. Stone. He glared at me, pointing accusingly with his ruler in hand. I can see you're nodding off over there. Don't you think I don't see you? I scratched the back of my head sharply. Sorry, sir, I murmured. I saw people giggling at the back of class as Stone stared me down. Galentophobia, the fear of being laughed at.
This thing, Michael?
Ophthalmophobia, fear of being stared at. Mr. Stone's steps echoed through the room as he trudged from in front of the whiteboard to right in front of my desk. I turned my gaze down to the desk as his eyes burned through my skin and into my very soul. You do well to keep your eyes on the board, young man. If you don't start paying attention, I'll wake you up myself. Are we clear? Was he seriously threatening me? His voice was strong and demanding, and much more hostile than I'd ever heard it before. I'm sorry, sir. I haven't gotten a lot of sleep lately. I'll be fine, I said shortly. I could hear more students giggling through class, some even louder than before. Did he seriously not care about him hearing that? Son, you are far from fine, he spat out in contempt, smacking his ruler down in the back of my hand. I jolted it away just as fast as he had hit it. What was his problem? This wasn't like him at all. We're gonna have to wake you up, one way or another. His voice dropped, rattling like 1,000 nails tumbling down an empty drain. Oh no. Oh hell no, it's starting to happen here in class. I cowered in my seat, body and mind both, dreading facing the man looming above me. Reluctantly, I slowly turned my eyes up to my instructor's face. If I was going to fight back these hallucinations, I had to know what I was going up against. But that spark of courage fizzled as fast as it had sparked, and my heart stopped the minute I set eyes on him. His face was no longer the stern, sharp-jawed face I had grown accustomed to. His face was built like a puppet's, and his mouth was a blender to hell. Thick, Gooping tears of blackness poured from wide, unblinking puppet eyes. Fiery white pupils smoldered in that wooden orb. His unhinged and gaping maw a wormhole into an all-consuming black abyss, spitting out embers and sparks from the rattling of his teeth smashing together. He shrieked out an inhuman roar of laughter, and I shrieked in absolute terror. I collapsed back out of my chair into the ground. The giggles and laughter of my classmates roared up in hysterics at my fall, and everyone was laughing. Laughing at my fear, laughing at my terror, their eyes wild and frenzied, burning with brimstone and hellfire, unblinking, always following my every move, fields of needles lining their throats, and grins split their faces in half from ear to ear. The room was ablaze with their ear-shattering laughter, their mouths spewing sprinklers of sparks and rust all across the room. Puppophilia, the fear of puppets. Pyrophobia, the fear of fire. Trypanophobia, the fear of needles. Inoclophobia, the fear of crowds. Stay back. Stay the hell away from me, I shrieked. Voice cracking as I spun from the ground, stumbling over fallen chairs and slamming myself back against the wall. They never took their eyes off me, not for an instant. They all just stared with their horrible, unblinking eyes and laughed at me. The echoes growing louder and louder and rang painfully in the deepest parts of my ears. My skin felt like it was being torn apart from their unblinking gazes, and I clapped my hands over my ears in agony. It hurt. It all hurt. My skin was crawling, and I could feel blood running down from my ears and dripping down from every pore in my skin. I trembled and shook, but I couldn't move. I was trapped. Their eyes glued me in place as my eyes glued onto that figure that I once knew was my teacher. His footsteps shook the ground, thundering towards me. What's wrong, Marcus? Can't wake up? He purred in that deathly low, hollow voice that turned my blood to ice. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't run. I was trapped. It's okay, Marcus. If you can't wake up, then just go back to sleep. My voice came out in short, uneven breaths as I struggled to try and make myself say something, anything. Mr. Stone snapped the ruler against the wall beside me, shattering it apart into a splinter of wood and daggers. He was thirsty for the source of the blood now pouring from my body. Marcus. Someone was calling me, but their voice was drowned by the roars of hysterical laughter ripping across the room. All I could do was try and force myself to form the words as Mr. Stone took hold of that ruler with both hands and positioned it over his head and down at me. No. Tamford! Marcus Tamford, wake up! My eyes snapped open wide, and a sharp gasp echoed from my lips. Breath rushed into my lungs, and I coughed roughly in pain. I could still feel the fresh blood in my lungs, and I could still feel the pain from the splinters driving into my chest, but nothing was there. Mr. Stone was grasping onto my shoulders from above me. The entire class pressed around in a choking circle around us. Our previous laughter was replaced with soft murmurs and hushed whispers. Claustrophobia. The fear of confined spaces. Let me go! Okay, get away from me! I thrashed back against that deep grip of my teacher and kicked wildly to try and get away from the crowd. Give him some air, damn it! Leave him alone, you bunch of vultures! One of the kids started violently shoving back some of the kids crowding around me, breaking apart a nice chunk in the crowd until Mr. Stone shot a deathly scowl to the rest of them. Back up unless you all want after-school detention, he barked. The threat quickly scattered the remaining kids choking around me. I just sat there, panting, wheezing, like I'd been shoved underwater for an hour. Mr. Stone finally released my shoulders and crouched down before me. Marcus, you all right? He asked. I swallowed roughly. He gave a short nod. He couldn't say anything. My body was still in shock from it all. I just pulled my knees to my chest and I hugged him there, giving another quiet nod in reply. He frowned. It was obvious he didn't believe me, but he breathed a heavy sigh of relief nonetheless. I think you should visit the nurse, Tamford. Have her call your mom and get you home. You clearly need the rest. I didn't want to go home. I knew he was right. Here at school was not the time to be freaking out over nothing, but still. How bad was I? I'll take him to the nurse, sir. I looked up from the floor and I saw my close friend Matt shifting his feet over the both of us. It's my friend. I can handle him, he said reassuringly. The suggestion seemed to please Stone as he stood up to his towering height above the both of us and gave a firm nod in approval. That's fine. Just tell them there was an emergency so that won't get you in any trouble. At least for not having a pass. Matt nodded before reaching down to lend me a hand back up to my feet. Everybody back to your seats. No time for lollygagging, I heard Mr. Stone announce as I was led out of the classroom with Matt. There was a long walk to the nurse's office from the classroom, and the silence between us was deafening as we started walking. I'd only just stopped shaking when Matt finally spoke up. You all right? He asked simply. I huffed out a pathetic little laugh. Yeah, I'm fine now. Matt had been my friend for long as I could remember. And he's always managed to pop up whenever I really needed him. Didn't matter where I was or what I was doing, he was always there with me. He was a little bit shorter than me, but not by a lot, since I was only 5'10". He has somehow natural, bright, cherry red hair, cut short with his long parted bangs that completely overpowered his dull gray-green eyes. He always wore this black and white striped shirt underneath a pair of dull, faded overalls and a pair of dusty brown boots. Stuck out like a sore thumb in the crowd, and yet, all the same, somehow nobody seemed to pay him any mind other than me. What happened back there? I asked, as we turned around the corner. Matt laughed awkwardly and scratched the back of his head. Yeah, well, you kind of fell asleep in the middle of class. Stone was trying to wake you up, but you wouldn't budge. Then you just kind of jumped out of your seat and started stumbling across the class like a crazy person. You were screaming and covering your ears and finally fell over a desk. You kind of just rolled around on the ground for a bit till Stone finally brought you back to us, so... He trailed off, grinning widely with a shrug. I guess you broke the school record on the crazy scale. Sounded about right, considering how much my head hurt at the time. I'd felt like I'd gone head-to-head with an angry rhino and lost. Great. So, people are going to be gossiping about me up and down this place. Matt snorted a laugh. Well, like they didn't already. Don't sweat it. You only got 1 year left anyway, so who cares, right? He assured me, giving a hearty pat on the back. I rolled my eyes, but couldn't help but smile right back. Yeah, you're right on that. Thanks, Matt. Anytime. Hey, next time you have a full-scale freak-out, do me a favor and not hit me in the face on your way down. Nah, it's not my fault you have such a punchable face. Yeah, well, next time I'll hit you back twice as hard. Just don't mess around, dick. We shared a good couple of laughs as we finally made it to the office. Times like this were much more bearable when he was here with me. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The air was uncomfortably quiet and still as I sat there waiting for the nurse to arrive in the office. The soft shuffling of staff was barely a whisper past the door, and the only company I had was the small clock ticking away on the desk. Silence was beginning to get to me. The lights of the room were blindingly bright, and the shadows around me were deep and dark. I could feel them breathing. They pulsed like the heart of a beast, and all their millions of breaths washed across my skin, soft patters of feet skittered across the floor, small whispers and giggles. And the shadows tickled my ears. They were watching me, laughing and sneering at my fear. I could feel their eyes burning into me from every angle. Autophobia, the fear of being alone, or of oneself. Stop it! This isn't the time for this. I clenched my eyes shut tight, and I took in one long, shaky breath. My heart was pounding in my chest, and it was getting harder and harder to breathe. None of this is real. None of this... Nothing is there. Everything is fine. It's all in your head. Quick, what's the value of pi? Name down all the phobias you know. Something, anything. Just think of something else. I bit my lip, trying with every fiber of my being to focus on anything else. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't drive my attention away. The click of the door opening brought me reeling back to my senses. The nurse slowly shuffled into the room, and with her presence, the visions and sounds immediately faded away. Hello, dear. Are you feeling at all better? Elderly nurse asked me in her honey-sweet voice. My body immediately relaxed at her comforting tone. Yeah, better than I did. I lied. She just smiled softly and moved over to sit at her desk. I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to check you out for any injuries in a moment, all right? I just need to fill these out first for the front desk, so they know that you'll be leaving early. That's fine, ma'am, thanks. And with that, she sat herself down, and I looked away to distract myself. Once more. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The minutes seemed to drag on forever as she scratched at her paperwork with her pen. I looked around the room, glad to see that the shadows were back to normal once more. Their voices and whispers had died away as well. But the longer I sat, and the longer the silence dragged out, the more I began to feel uneasy all over again. The nurse took her dear sweet time as she looked from her computer screen down at the papers before her and back again. I could swear as she glanced over at me when I glanced away, and her hands jittered erratically, frantically, as she wrote. What's her problem? Was it something I said? She's waiting, Marcus. I froze. A deep, dark, bone-chilling voice echoed through my head. It stopped my heart in sheer terror, and my blood ran cold in my veins. I slowly moved my eyes from the floor to the nurse at her desk, but there she still sat, scratching away at her papers, as if nothing had happened. She's waiting for her moment, Marcus. She's going to take it the moment you let your guard down. She's going to kill you. That voice. I swear I know that voice. She's going to kill you, Marcus. You can't let her take the chance. You have to kill her before she kills you. What is this thing? What the hell is it talking about? I clenched my eyes shut tight and covered my ears. Familiar or not, this was insane. I was about to kill some harmless old woman, and she wouldn't kill me either. The voice chuckled low, teasing, so painfully familiar still. I could feel those eyes on me again, the invisible eyes of the shadows that burned into my soul. I could hear the voices again, whispering, laughing, louder, inching ever painfully closer towards me. Sweetie, is everything all right? My eyes snapped up, and I leapt back in my seat at the sound of the nurse's voice. She stood there right before me, looking at me in concern. My cheeks burned in embarrassment, and I slowly moved my hands off my ears. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. I coughed out, darting my gaze away from hers. The nurse just sighed and stood herself upright. Please try to relax, dear. Your mother will be here soon, and then you'll be able to go home. She patiently reassured me. Will you be all right until then? I held up my arms before me defensively. No, really, I'll be fine. Ma'am, I'm okay now. I swear. She stared at me for a moment, as if trying to see if I were lying, and then she smiled softly. Just to be sure, let me get you something. I have a feeling it'll help. She shuffled over to a door off to the side of the room and clicked it open. I craned my neck to look past her into the closet and froze at the disturbing contents that had hung and stacked inside. Vials of unlabeled fluids, syringes of all sizes, splints, casts, and even a bone saw that was dangling from a nail on the door. She looked back and just laughed at my disturbed expression. I used to work in the ER in a hospital, sweetie, so in case of any emergencies, I have all necessary supplies for any kind of quick mend. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. She turned back to me and buried her nose in the shelves of the closet, blocking my vision from seeing any further inside. I felt uneasy, and I flicked my eyes back to the shadows of the room. They were back, and their bodies pulsed ever stronger than before, throbbing like the pulse of a man desperately gasping for breath. All over again, I could feel their sting. I could see their eyes burning into my skin. A hot wash of breath billowed over the back of my neck, and my entire body tensed. You see, she has everything she needs to commit the perfect murder right in there. Don't wait, Marcus. Act. I dared not move. I dared not even breathe. I slowly closed my eyes and I prayed silently that whatever was there would go away. Bang! It leapt up in my seat and the door of that closet was closed roughly, slammed shut, tearing through the silence of that room like a dagger. The nurse turned back to me, smiling in that same honey-sweet way that she had. Your mother got your new medicine, you see. It's an injection, though. So you're going to have to relax and let me take care of you now. She slowly turned towards me, raising up her...
What happened?
What happened with you?
Playing the game still?
Well, you were there?
Yeah.
I was trying to talk to you, the damn fucking party wheel shit back.
Yeah, so I was doing that NAT fucking network shit. I can't get past this one part, dude.
My daughter was born on July 18th, 2006 at 9:56 a.m. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, 14 inches. Proud parents of Sebastian and Maria Castellanos. So you have to play the person to understand the same. I just found the birth certificate for the girl. I told you this game connects to the second one. Yes.
Oh my god. Come on! What the fuck, dude? Come on, turn on, you sons of bitches. Go! Go, Sebastian, go! No! No! How did that stupid fucking bitch grab me? And it's fucking retarded. I can't kill this bitch in this damn stupid fucking room. I can't use any of my weapons, man. He doesn't want to run. He's being dumber than shit. my god. Oh my god, dude. Oh my, you can't even see, man. You can't even see.